it seems like a lot of things have kind of stuck to being inside the box. And so if you're a Republican or you're a Democrat, well, I'll just stick to Republican, then regardless of what's going on in the other box, because you're in that box, you don't want to necessarily see that for what it is or try to give it a chance to interpret that. And my question about that is, what changes outside of the box would you like to see in the future in terms of just kind of embracing the multi-culturalism and ethnicities in this country, number one, and then how do you see that happening in terms of just popular culture, media, etc.?
I mean, I would say in terms of what would be really great, like really, really great, is for people to be understood for their complexity. So does everybody understand what I mean by that? You know? Because it's like, being black is not one thing. Being white is not one thing. Being Asian is not one thing. Being gay is not one thing. Being straight is not one thing, you know? And I think that out of, you know, you kind of have to have a little bit like functional simplicity when you're trying to talk about things, but I think it's most important that, you know, for each of us, you know, when I look at each person in this room, there's a world of experiences that is very specific to you, you know? And for some reason, there's some kind of sense that that's not the case, you know what I mean? And I think that I don't really understand why that is. I think some of what could happen, you know, from an educational perspective, right, is in terms of what we're learning in school, how the textbooks are written, what you're forced to read and study, could change a lot, right? And we could acknowledge the multiracial nature of the creation of this country. You know, we could talk about a lot of different ethnic groups as like just haven't got here, but that's not the case. There's been multicultural, you know, multi-ethnic collaborations and conflicts throughout the entire history of this country. And in terms of what's archived and what's, you know, recorded and what you're forced to learn, you know, does not reflect that. And so I think that you know, that sucks, because then, you know, all of us, if we're interested, we got to spend extra time to learn those things. So those are some of the things that I would like to see, you know, happen outside the box. And I think also for all of us individually to not get confused about, you know, what somebody says that you are and what you know to yourself to be.
It might be a little Pollyanna to say that the boxes just shouldn't be there. I mean, they get brought into, you know, they get brought in so far that it's become no point to the boxes. To be honest, the current U.S. census system is one that I actually appreciate, which is a system whereby you can check whichever box there's in as many boxes as you want. The problem I've always had is the inability or the requirement that I only check one box. Because again, that assumes that I'm just one identity, and for some people that's fine, but for me that's not fine. And you know, it allows the world to kind of put you in these small boxes that aren't really 21st century. It's not the way the world is. So I prefer either to check as many as you want or eliminate the boxes altogether. I mean, as I said about my newborn, one of the things that was a consolation for me as I was looking at the Caucasian written on his ethnicity was that I assume that that really won't be a big issue for him in 20 years. You know, I don't think that those kind of racial boxes will kind of mean the same things that they do now, and certainly that they meant when I was, you know, maybe 35 years ago.
So one of the things I would love to hear from you in the sense of not just questions, but any stories you have to share. I'm interested to know in high school, how important are these boxes to you high school students in terms of who people are and in terms of friendships or relationships? How does that matter to people? Raise your hand if it matters. What about on the college level? Are we interacting interracially on the college level still? Raise your hand if the boxes don't matter on college. Now I see less college hands up than I do high schools. So will you guys come down and talk to me? What happens between high school and college to make race become a more important issue?
I think when you said that, one thing that's interesting is I coach high school basketball, and the majority of my team is African American or black kids, whatever you want to call them. And when I'm in the car with them and we're riding to go to games, or I'm taking them home or to the bar station, whatever it may be, I use that time to just talk to them and kind of use that as mentor time. And one thing that caught my ear when I first started working at the school 3 years ago was that a lot of the kids used to talk about how they liked dating girls that weren't black. And these, were brothers who were saying this, young brothers. And I asked them why. And they said, kind of the stereotypical things that you might hear on TV or on the radio that, black girls are too ghetto, they're too loud, they cause too much drama, et cetera, et cetera. So I think at the high school level, there's definitely, I guess what you would call the inverse of that. Instead of trying to be inclusive to your ethnicity or your race or your culture, you actually want to kind of repel it and go against it in terms of, the black-on-black relationship. So I think that's really interesting in itself.
When I was in high school, because my father is actually, he's African and Nigerian, and I'm Jamaican. My mother's Jamaican, so I'm half. But when I was in high school, I was always like, oh, you're African. And I was raised up in America, I was raised up in Chicago, so I had people come to me asking questions about, oh, how's it to be an African, or how's it like to be black and this and that, and I didn't know anything about it because I wasn't raised up in a black neighborhood. I wasn't raised up with African Americans. I was raised up with Caucasians all my life. And being in high school, being on the track team, I wanted to fit in. I was like, okay, I'm gonna join the track team because all of them are black. So at least I can raise something about myself, my black side, and actually, get with it. But being in college, I've learned to just accept myself for who I am and not try to be in a clique, but just be who I am and know who I am as not as a black girl or a Jamaican person, but for me as Elizabeth.
So when someone introduces themselves to you, how do you introduce yourself as? Who are you? What do you say to them?
When someone introduces themselves to me, I don't care about race, because where I grew up, it was just either you were black or you were white. There wasn't any Mexican, there wasn't nothing. You was black or white. And we didn't see, if somebody was black or not, or somebody was white. We just saw a person. So when somebody introduced themselves to me, I'm like, oh, hi, I'm William. I'm 17. I don't have to be black, I don't have to be white, I don't have to be I can be whatever I want to be.
So even before Obama, you were free to feel like you could be who you wanted to be, right?
Yeah.
Now, where did you grow up? You talked about the community you grew up in. What community did you grow in? You grew up in Mississippi. I can identify that. We grew up in Alabama. Actually, Aaron worked in Tuscaloosa for a while, which is one of the inspirations for the movie was that there are very few boxes. There are very few others there. So you get that sort of place where being black and white is pretty much your options, or you're outside of the box. But you mentioned the two different groups, and then you said the race didn't matter. Did you see a lot of interaction between the races in terms of black and white folks in the community you grew up in?
Well, honestly, where I grew up, because I started out I guess here, I don't know what y'all call it, but down there we call it the ghetto. That's where I lived. And they were all black. Everybody was black. Your neighbor was black. Everybody was black. The only person that was white was maybe a landlord. So at my school, there was probably in the program that I was in, maybe 20 white kids, and then the rest of the school was black.